The most dangerous man in Chicago was being humiliated by 8 pounds of baby. Capone AI had negotiated with cartel bosses and federal judges, but Isabella's screams were shredding his reputation 1 decibel at a time. When a black woman in a tired button-down crossed the aisle without permission and plucked his daughter from his arms, the cabin froze. She hummed. Isabella quieted. And then Capone's phone buzzed. "We found her. The witness. She's right in front of you." Before you continue listening, please let know where you're watching from. Now back to the story. If this story's got you hooked, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I've got another story coming your way that's just as thrilling, maybe even better. You definitely don't want to miss it. The thing about power is that it works everywhere except on a crying baby at 35,000 feet. Capone AI learned this the hard way on Flight 447 to Miami, watching his carefully constructed empire of fear crumble under the relentless assault of his 6-month-old daughter's lungs. Isabella had volume that could strip paint. In the bassinet of organized crime, Capone had cradled million-dollar operations and blood-soaked treaties, but this 7-pound tyrant in a onesie had reduced him to something he'd never been: publicly helpless. "Sir, perhaps if you—" The flight attendant's smile was cracking at the edges, her voice climbing to match Isabella's pitch. "I've tried everything," Capone growled, bouncing the baby with a kind of aggression usually reserved for debt collections. His custom Tom Ford suit was developing sweat stains that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The Patek Philippe on his wrist, $85,000 of Swiss precision, told him this nightmare had lasted exactly 14 minutes. It felt like 14 years. Around him, first class had become a pressure cooker of judgment. The businessman in 3A had stopped pretending to work on his laptop. The elderly couple in 5B were communicating entirely through pointed glares. Even the woman in 7C, who'd been sleeping since takeoff, had woken up to shoot him a look that could curdle milk. Capone had survived federal investigations, cartel wars, and a hostile takeover attempt that left 3 bodies in the Chicago River. But these passengers, these soft, ordinary people with their soft, ordinary lives, were looking at him like he was the problem. Like he wasn't trying. Like he didn't know that every scream was another chip in the armor of his reputation. "Maybe the bottle," the flight attendant suggested weakly. "You think I'm an idiot?" Capone snapped, then immediately regretted it. Even in crisis, image mattered. He was Capone AI, named after greatness, destined for it. Not some panicking father who yelled at service workers. "Forgive me. I mean, yes, I've attempted the bottle. Multiple times." She refuses. Isabella, sensing his desperation like a shark sensing blood, cranked the volume higher. Her face was the color of marinara sauce, her tiny fists pumping like she was conducting an orchestra of chaos. Capone tried the swaying thing again, the one his late wife Sophia had made look effortless. On him, it looked like he was trying to shake loose change from a vending machine. "You're holding her wrong." The voice cut through the cabin noise like a knife, through tension. Capone's head snapped toward the source. Row 7, aisle seat. The woman who'd been giving him the stink eye. She was black, maybe 30, with her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail that had probably been perfect 6 hours ago but was now showing the strain of travel. Her white button-down shirt was crisp despite the flight, though Capone's eye for detail, honed by years of assessing threats and opportunities, caught the frayed collar, the slight discoloration that spoke of too many washes. Her eyes, though. Her eyes had that particular kind of tired that came from working 2 jobs and raising a kid alone. He'd seen that look before, usually on the faces of people who worked in his buildings, cleaned his offices, served his drinks. But there was something else in her eyes. Something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. She wasn't scared of him. At all. "Excuse me?" Capone's voice carried that razor-edge tone that usually preceded unfortunate incidents. Men twice her size had backed down from that voice. Men with guns. The woman stood up, and without asking permission, without showing even a molecule of the deference the world usually showed him, she walked directly into his personal space and reached for Isabella. The cabin held its breath. Somewhere in the back, someone gasped. Capone should have stopped her. Should have said something, done something, activated whatever protective instinct fathers were supposed to have about strangers touching their children. But there was something in the way she moved, confident, purposeful, like she'd done this 1,000 times and wasn't interested in his permission, that froze him in place. She took Isabella from his arms, and for one horrible moment, the baby's screams intensified, as if outraged by the audacity of the handoff. Then the woman shifted her, positioning Isabella against her shoulder in a way that looked simple but clearly wasn't, because Capone had been trying to do exactly that for 14 minutes. Her stomach's upset, the woman said, not to Capone but to Isabella, her voice low and melodic. You've been holding her like she's a football you're afraid to fumble. Babies need to feel like the world ain't ending, even when it is. She began to sway, not the desperate, jerky motion Capone had been doing, but something smoother, almost dance-like. Her right hand supported Isabella's head, while her left hand patted a gentle rhythm on the baby's back. She hummed something, some melody that Capone didn't recognize but that seemed to bypass Isabella's rage entirely. 30 seconds. That's how long it took for Isabella's screams to downgrade to whimpers. 60 seconds. Silence. Complete, blessed, miraculous silence. The cabin exhaled like a punctured tire. The businessman in 3A went back to his laptop. The elderly couple stopped glaring. Even the flight attendant's smile returned to its normal wattage. Capone stood there, arms empty, pride wounded, staring at this woman like she'd just split the atom with her bare hands. How did you? His voice came out rougher than intended, and he had to clear his throat. What did you do? I'm a mother, the woman said, still swaying, still humming between words. Single mom, worked 2 jobs, one at the hospital, one at the diner on 5th, and my boy Marcus had colic, so bad, I thought about checking myself into the art just for the quiet. You learn or you lose your mind. Sometimes both. She glanced at the window seat beside her own, where a small boy, maybe 3 years old, was slumped against the wall in that boneless way kids sleep, completely oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. The kid's shoes were worn but clean, his clothes obviously cared for even if they'd seen better days. The woman looked back at Capone, and for the first time since she'd stood up, really looked at him. Her gaze traveled from his Berluti leather shoes to his custom suit to the pinky ring that cost more than her annual salary. Then to his face, the scars hidden under his collar, the tattoo peeking out from his cuff, the cold calculation in his eyes that most people either missed or chose to ignore. She didn't miss it, and she didn't ignore it. You gonna keep standing there looking like someone stole your wallet, she said, or you gonna let me show you how to hold your own daughter? That snapped Capone back to reality. He'd been so mesmerized by the transformation of Isabella from Banshee to Angel that he'd forgotten himself. Forgotten who he was. What he was. Show me, he said, because pride was one thing but being defeated by a baby again was another. The woman demonstrated the hold, one hand cradling Isabella's head, the other supporting her bottom, the baby's full weight pressed against his chest where she could feel his heartbeat. Firm but gentle, she explained, adjusting his arms. Same way you'd hold anything precious that could break. Don't tense up. Babies feel that energy, and they feed off it. You're stressed, she's stressed. You calm down, she calms down. The irony wasn't lost on Capone. He'd held many things in his life, Glocks, stacks of hundreds, the throats of men who'd crossed him, but never had he felt more dangerous than holding this fragile life that depended entirely on him not dropping her. Isabella settled against him, her tiny hand finding a fistful of a shirt, her breathing evening out into the shallow rhythm of infant sleep. Thank you, Capone said and meant it. The words felt foreign in his mouth. He didn't thank people often. Usually, people thanked him for their jobs, their lives, their continued existence. Don't mention it. The woman was already turning back to her seat. Wait, Capone said. Your name, Miss. She paused, half-turned, and something flickered across her face. Calculation. Decision. Then it was gone, replaced by a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Thompson. Mercy Thompson. She returned to her seat, checked on Marcus with the practiced efficiency of a mother who could assess her child's well-being in 2 seconds flat, then pulled out a worn paperback and began to read, effectively dismissing Capone from her attention as thoroughly as if he'd ceased to exist. Capone settled back into his seat, Isabella finally peaceful against his chest, and allowed himself a moment to breathe. The flight attendant brought him a glass of water that he hadn't asked for, but definitely needed. Around him, first class returned to its normal state of muted conversations and keyboard clicks. Everything was fine. Crisis averted. Disaster prevented. Then his phone buzzed. One text. From Marco, his consigliere. The man who handled the things Capone didn't want to think about until they were handled. The witness, Mercy Thompson. We've been looking for her. She's on your flight. Row 7. Capone's blood didn't just freeze. It crystallized, turned to ice in his veins, made every nerve ending in his body scream at once.
No.
Not possible. But Marco didn't make mistakes. Marco was annoyingly, frustratingly, perfectly accurate about these things. Capone's mind raced back 3 months. The parking lot. The transaction that had gone sideways ended with Dimitri's body bleeding out on the asphalt and witnesses scrambling. They tracked down and convinced, all of them except one. A woman. Worked 2 jobs, one at Chicago Memorial, one at a diner. Had a kid. Had seen everything. Had disappeared like smoke before they could reach her. Mercy Thompson. Hospital. Diner on 5th. Single mom. Son named Marcus. The details aligned like tumblers in a lock, and the lock opened onto a reality Capone didn't want to face. The woman who'd just saved him, who touched his daughter, showed him kindness, performed a miracle with nothing but a gentle touch and a mother's wisdom, was the same woman he'd ordered his people to find and silence. Permanently, if necessary. She was sitting 6 feet away, humming to her sleeping son, completely unaware that the man she'd just helped was the same man who'd signed what might as well have been her death warrant. Or was she? Capone looked across the aisle slowly, carefully, the way you look at something dangerous that might notice you noticing it. Mercy Thompson was reading her book, some battered romance novel with a shirtless man on the cover, but as Capone watched, she turned a page without her eyes moving across the lines. She wasn't reading. She was waiting. And then she looked up, looked directly at him. Their eyes met, and in that moment, that terrible, clarifying moment, Capone saw it. The recognition, the calculation, the knowledge. She'd known the entire time. "My mama," Mercy said quietly, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry across the aisle but not loud enough to disturb anyone else, "always told me that babies and dogs can sense evil. Babies especially. They cry around it.
Fuss.
Won't settle." She glanced down at Isabella, peaceful and sleeping against Capone's chest. "Your daughter likes me just fine. You might want to think about what that means, Mr. AI." It wasn't a threat. Threats were Capone's language, and he would have recognized one. This was something far more dangerous than a threat. This was a truth. A truth that said, "I know who you are. I knew when I stood up. I helped you anyway. Your daughter trusts me. What are you going to do about it?" Capone AI, a man who'd never backed down from anything, who'd built an empire on the principle that weakness was death and mercy was weakness, found himself doing something he hadn't done since he was 18 years old and just starting to understand what kind of man he'd have to become. He nodded.
Slowly. Once.
Then he picked up his phone, found Marco's text, and did something that would probably haunt him later. He deleted it without responding. The flight continued. Isabella slept. Marcus slept. Mercy Thompson went back to her book. Actually reading this time, Capone could tell by the way her eyes moved, and Capone sat in his leather first-class seat worth more than most people's monthly salary, holding his daughter, thinking about the nature of power and mercy and what it meant when the two collided at 35,000 feet. Outside the window, clouds drifted past like ghosts. Inside the cabin, a debt had been created that Capone didn't know how to pay. Because some debts, he was realizing, couldn't be paid with money or fear or power. Sometimes mercy was the most powerful move of all. And sometimes the most dangerous person on a plane wasn't the mob boss in first class. It was the single mother in 7C who'd just beaten him at a game he didn't know he was playing. The thing about landing in Miami is that the heat hits you like a physical force, even in the air-conditioned tunnel connecting the plane to the terminal. Capone felt at the moment the cabin door opened, that thick, wet warmth that made Chicago's winters feel like a distant memory. He'd made this trip 100 times. Business in Miami meant meetings with people who preferred subtropical climates for their negotiations, places where bodies decomposed faster, and everyone had a boat with no questions asked. But this time, Isabella complicated everything. You couldn't exactly bring a baby to the kind of meetings Capone usually took in Miami. Which was why Sophia's sister, Aunt Gina, with her mansion in Coral Gables and her questions Capone didn't want to answer, was waiting at baggage claim to take Isabella for the weekend. Capone gathered his daughter's things with the awkward efficiency of a man still learning the choreography of fatherhood. Diaper bag.
Pacifiers.
That stuffed rabbit Isabella sometimes tolerated. The stroller that cost $3,000 and folded like origami designed by sadists. Through it all, he was aware of Mercy Thompson 3 rows back, taking her time, letting other passengers flow around her like water around a stone. She wasn't rushing, wasn't nervous, just moved with that same deliberate calm she'd shown on the plane. Marcus, now awake and holding her hand, rubbing sleep from his eyes with his free fist. The kid was cute, Capone noticed against his will. Round face, big eyes, Spider-Man shirt that had seen too many wash cycles. The kind of kid who probably asked a million questions and believed everything his mother told him because she was his whole world. Capone remembered being that kid once, before his father introduced him to the family business with a gun and a choice that wasn't really a choice. He shook off the memory and focused on the present problem. Marco would be waiting outside with the car. Marco, who'd sent that text. Marco, who was now expecting a response, expecting confirmation that the target had been acquired, expecting Capone to do what Capone always did, handle problems permanently. The crowd shuffled forward. First class deplaned first, one of the few privileges Capone actually cared about, and he found himself in the jet bridge with Isabella, who'd woken up and was making those pre-cry sounds that every parent learned to dread. "Not now, Principessa," Capone murmured, doing the swaying thing Mercy had shown him. It worked for about 10 seconds. Then Isabella remembered she had lungs and opinions and decided to share both with everyone in a 100-foot radius. "Here." Capone turned. Mercy was right behind him, Marcus at her side, and she was holding out the stuffed rabbit that must have fallen from his diaper bag. "She was reaching for it when you walked past," Mercy said, pressing the toy into Isabella's grabbing hands. Instantly, the pre-cry sound stopped, replaced by the contemplative silence of a baby discovering texture.
"Thank you," Capone said.
Again. "You keep thanking me like you're not used to people helping you," Mercy observed. She said it lightly, but Capone heard the weight underneath. The subtext that said, "Or maybe you're not used to helping people without them owing you." Marcus tugged on Mercy's hand. "Mama, I'm hungry." "I know, baby. We'll get food after we get our bags. But I'm hungry now." The kid had that particular whine that only children could achieve, the one that could drill through concrete. Mercy's jaw tightened just slightly, not anger, just exhaustion. The exhaustion of a mother who'd been traveling since 5 a.m., who'd probably skipped breakfast to afford the flight, who had another hour of airport navigation ahead of her before she could even think about food. Capone made a decision that would have horrified Marco. "The Centurion Lounge," he heard himself say. "After baggage claim. They have food. Good food. Bring the kid." Mercy looked at him like he'd just offered her a live grenade. "That's a $500 a year membership. I'm aware of what I pay." "Why?" It was a fair question. Capone had asked himself the same thing. Why help her? Why extend anything beyond the basic gratitude for what she'd done on the plane? Why risk Marco's wrath, the organization's protocols, everything that kept the machine running smoothly? Because babies can sense evil, and Isabella liked her. Because Mercy had known who he was and helped him anyway. Because somewhere in the last hour, Capone had started to wonder if the man who built an empire on fear was the same man who wanted his daughter to inherit that empire. "Because you helped me," Capone said simply. "And because the kid's hungry." It's not complicated. Mercy studied him for a long moment, and Capone had the unsettling feeling of being X-rayed, examined, assessed in ways he couldn't control. Then she nodded once.
"One condition," she said.
"After we eat, we're done. You go your way, I go mine. This doesn't make us friends. Doesn't make us anything." Agreed. They walked through the terminal together, an unlikely trio plus one. A Mafia boss in a Tom Ford suit, a single mother in a tired button-down, and two children who didn't care about any of it. To anyone watching, they might have looked like a family. Unconventional, maybe, but family nonetheless. Capone's phone buzzed. "Marco again. Where are you? Gina's waiting. Also, target status?" Capone typed back, delayed. "Handled Gina. We'll explain later." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared.
Appeared again.
Finally, "Boss, I need confirmation on the Thompson situation." Capone put his phone away without responding. The Centurion Lounge was one of those airport oases that existed specifically to remind regular travelers that there was a whole tier of existence they'd never access. Dark wood, leather chairs, a buffet that actually resembled food instead of airport sadness. The attendant at the desk smiled at Capone with the recognition that came from seeing his face on the VIP list every month. "Mr. AI, welcome back. Will you need?" She spotted Mercy and Marcus, and the smile faltered just slightly. "Recalibrated. Will your party be needing the family room?" "Just a table," Capone said. "Private." They were led to a corner booth that gave Capone a view of all entrances and exits, habit from 30 years of never sitting with his back to a door, and suddenly he was watching Marcus's eyes go wide at the sight of the buffet. "Can I have mac and cheese?" the kid whispered to Mercy, like he was asking for the moon. "Let's see what they have," Mercy said, but Capone heard the worry underneath. The calculation of how to fill a 3-year-old stomach from a lounge buffet without looking like they were taking advantage. "Get whatever he wants," Capone said. "And yourself. Consider it payment for the parenting lesson at 35,000 feet. Mercy hesitated, then nodded. She took Marcus's hand and headed for the buffet, leaving Capone alone with Isabella, who was gnawing on her rabbit like it had personally offended her. His phone buzzed again.
Not Marco this time. Vincent, his lieutenant in Miami.
"Dimitri's people are asking questions." They heard someone saw what went down. "You need me to handle it?" "Dimitri. The body in the parking lot. The reason Mercy Thompson had spent 3 months running." Capone looked across the lounge at Mercy, who was piling mac and cheese onto a plate while Marcus pointed excitedly at the fruit selection. She moved through the space like she was used to being invisible, taking up as little room as possible, a survival skill learned from years of existing in places that didn't want her. His thumbs hovered over the keyboard. 2 letters could end this. 2 letters, O and K, and Vincent would handle it. The witness would disappear. The problem would be solved. The organization would continue running smoothly.
"Stand down."
Situation resolved differently. He sent it before he could reconsider. Mercy returned with 2 plates, 1 mountain of mac and cheese for Marcus, 1 modest collection of vegetables and protein for herself. She'd taken the cheapest items, Capone noted. Even when someone else was paying, she took only what she needed. Marcus dove into his food with the single-minded focus of a starving child. Mercy watched him eat with that expression mothers get, the one that says their own hunger doesn't matter as long as their kid is fed. "Eat," Capone said to her. "The food's not poisoned." "Probably." That got a small smile. "The probably is what concerns me." "Fair." Capone shifted Isabella to his other arm, trying to figure out how to hold a baby and eat simultaneously. This was apparently an advanced skill he hadn't unlocked yet. "Give her here," Mercy said, reaching across the table. "Eat your food before it gets cold." "I can't keep asking you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference." Capone handed Isabella over. This was becoming a pattern, and watched Mercy settle his daughter against her shoulder with that same effortless confidence. Isabella, the traitor, made a happy little noise and grabbed a fistful of Mercy's ponytail. She likes you, Capone observed. Babies are good judges of character. Earlier, you said babies cry around evil. I did. And Isabella hasn't cried once since I picked her up. Mercy met his eyes over Isabella's head. Makes you think, doesn't it? Capone took a bite of his food, chewing slowly, using the time to organize his thoughts. The question he wanted to ask was dangerous. But then again, this entire situation was dangerous. Might as well commit to the danger. Why'd you help me? He asked. On the plane. You knew who I was. Did I? Don't play games, Miss Thompson. You said my name. Called me Mr. AI. Most people don't know that name unless they know what it means. Mercy was quiet for a moment, adjusting Isabella's position, her expression unreadable. Marcus was still demolishing his mac and cheese, oblivious to the adult conversation happening above his head. 3 months ago, Mercy finally said, her voice low enough that it wouldn't carry beyond their booth, I was walking to my car after a double shift. Midnight, parking lot behind Chicago Memorial. I heard shouting. Saw 2 men. One of them pulled a gun. She paused. The other man fell. Didn't get back up. Capone's jaw tightened. And I ran. Got Marcus from the babysitter, packed 2 bags, drove to my cousin's place in Indiana. Spent 3 months looking over my shoulder, waiting for the men in expensive suits to show up and make me forget what I saw. So why come back? Why get on a plane where you knew I'd be? I didn't know you'd be on the plane, Mercy said. That was coincidence. Bad luck. God's sense of humor, I don't know what to call it. But when I saw you with Isabella, saw you struggling. She shook her head. I've got my own demons, Mr. AI. But I'm not the kind of woman who watches a baby cry when I can do something about it. Not even for you. The brutal honesty of it hit Capone like a punch. She'd risked everything. Her safety, Marcus's safety, because a baby was crying. Because her conscience wouldn't let her do anything else. What would you have done in Mercy's place? Would you help someone you feared, knowing they could destroy you? Drop your thoughts below. You understand, Capone said slowly, that by helping me, by revealing yourself, you've put yourself in more danger. My people know you're here now. Know you're alive. I figured that out when you got that text on the plane, Mercy said calmly. Saw your face change. Saw you look at me different. She kissed the top of Isabella's head gently. But here's what I also figured out. You deleted that text. Didn't respond. Didn't do whatever it is men like you do when people become problems. How did you? I'm a black woman in America who's worked service jobs her whole life. You think I don't know how to read people? How to see things without being seen seeing them? She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. It's a survival skill, Mr. AI. One I've had to perfect. Capone sat back in his chair, reassessing everything. This woman, this tired, overworked, underpaid single mother, had been playing chess while he thought they were playing checkers. She'd seen his hesitation, his moment of decision, and gambled her entire life on that hesitation meaning something. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Why not just take your kid and disappear again? Because I'm tired of running, Mercy said simply. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of living like I did something wrong when all I did was witness someone else's sin. She looked directly at him. And because I think you're tired too. Tired of being whoever Capone AI is supposed to be. Otherwise you wouldn't have hesitated. Wouldn't have deleted that text. Wouldn't have invited me to lunch. The words hung in the air between them. Dangerous and true. Before Capone could respond, Marcus looked up from his empty plate, mac and cheese sauce smeared across his face like war paint. Mama, I gotta go potty. The moment shattered. Mercy laughed, genuine and warm, and handed Isabella back to Capone. Real life doesn't pause for dramatic conversations. Come on, baby. Let's get you cleaned up. She took Marcus's hand and headed toward the restrooms, leaving Capone alone with his daughter and his thoughts. Isabella looked up at him with Sophia's eyes, blue-gray like morning fog, and made that gurgling sound babies make when they're content. Happy. Safe. Safe with him. safe with the man whose organization had put a price on Mercy Thompson's silence. Capone's phone buzzed. Marco, because of course it was Marco. Boss, Gina's getting agitated. Where are you? And, seriously, what's happening with the Thompson situation? Vincent says you called him off. Need clarification. Capone looked at his phone. Looked at the restroom door, where Mercy had disappeared. Looked down at Isabella, who was watching him with that unblinking baby stare that seemed to see straight through to whatever soul he had left. Then he typed, "Meeting in progress. We'll call you later. Thompson situation is handled my way. Stand down until further notice." Your way? Boss, with all respect, this isn't protocol. The organization has procedures for. Then it's good I'm the one running the organization, Capone typed back. Stand down, Marco. That's not a request. He sent it and immediately turned his phone to silent. Mercy laughed, sharp and bitter. That's a pretty way to say you're having a crisis of conscience. Maybe I am. Capone moved to the window, checking the parking lot again.
Clear.
My wife died 6 months ago. Cancer. I held her hand while she asked me to be better for Isabella. To give our daughter a different life than the one we had. And have you? I don't know how, Capone admitted. This is all I've ever known. My father brought me into the organization when I was 18. Taught me that power and fear were the only currencies that mattered. That mercy was weakness. Then why are you here instead of sending someone to finish what they started in that parking lot? It was the question Capone had been asking himself since the plane. Since the moment Mercy had taken Isabella from his arms and made her stop crying. Since he'd seen her with Marcus and recognized something he'd lost somewhere along the way to becoming Capone AI. Because, he said slowly, I don't want my daughter growing up in a world where the only option is to be afraid or be the thing people are afraid of. And because you reminded me that there are other ways to be powerful. Such as choosing mercy when you have the power to choose otherwise. Mercy studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she stood, walked to the window beside him, careful to maintain distance but close enough to speak quietly. Here's what I need, she said. I need to know Marcus and I are safe. Not just today, not just this week, but permanently. I need your people to forget I exist. I need to go back to Chicago, back to my jobs, back to my life without looking over my shoulder. Done. I'm not finished. Her voice hardened. I also need you to understand that what I saw that night, Dimitri dying, it changed me. Made me realize how fragile everything is. So if you're asking me to forget it, to pretend it didn't happen, I can't do that. I'm not asking you to forget, Capone said. I'm asking you to let me make it right. Or as right as it can be.
How?
That was the question.
How did you make murder right?
How did you balance scales that were already soaked in blood? I don't have all the answers, Capone admitted. But I have resources. Money. Connections. If there's something I can do for Dimitri's family beyond the settlement they've already received, tell me. If there's something you need to feel safe, to build a better life for Marcus, tell me that too. Mercy turned to face him fully. You can't buy forgiveness. I'm not trying to. I'm trying to build something different. Maybe for me. Maybe for Isabella. Maybe for people like you who get caught in the crossfire. And your organization? The men who work for you? They'll just accept this sudden change of heart. Probably not, Capone said. But I'm the boss. They'll adapt or find other employment. You make it sound so simple. It's not. It'll be complicated and messy, and probably blow up in my face. Capone allowed himself a small smile. But then again, so is fatherhood, and I'm slowly figuring that out too. For the first time since he'd arrived, Mercy's expression softened. Not trust exactly, but something adjacent to it. The possibility of trust. Room 214, she said. You know where to find me if you're serious about this. But Capone, Mr. AI, whatever we're calling you, if this is a game, if you're playing me, I will burn your entire world down. I've got nothing to lose and everything to protect. I believe you, Capone said. And he did. He left the room 10 minutes later, walking down those exterior stairs into the humid Miami night, his phone already buzzing with Marco's latest attempt to reach him. This time, Capone answered. "We need to talk," Marco said immediately. "About Thompson. About protocol. About—" "Set up a meeting," Capone interrupted. "Tomorrow. Full leadership. It's time we discuss some changes to how we operate." Silence on the other end. Then, "Boss, are you sure about this?" Capone thought about Isabella sleeping peacefully. About Mercy Thompson choosing kindness over fear. About Sophia's last words asking him to be better. "No," he said honestly. "But I'm doing it anyway." He hung up and drove into the Miami night, toward whatever came next, knowing that mercy and power were about to collide in ways that would change everything. Or destroy it. But at least it would be his choice. Thank you for watching the story to the end. If you enjoyed the story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting and even more intriguing as can ever imagine. So, do check it out.